when I eat fat, it goes in my body and becomes fat, and fat is bad.
Yeah, that's what everybody thinks, but it's not true.
Hey, this is Ryan of Happy Healthy Vegan. Well, College Humor put out a video about fat, how fat is not bad for us. Fat strangely doesn't make us fat. It even doesn't cause heart disease or obesity according to them. No, the villain in this case, they say, is sugar, carbohydrates. So I'm going to show how pretty much everything they say in this video is strangely wrong. So strange that I have a sneaking suspicion as to why, but I'll get to that later.
People have been eating fat for as long as humans have existed, and their lives were swell.
Fat tastes good.
Well, they say a lot of stupid things in this video, but this is one of the stupidest. Like, yeah, people have been eating all three of the macronutrients, fat, protein, and carbs, through all of human history. And what's even stupider is that they show that person there eating the fat, the meat. Well, if you punch in like some kind of primal steak, I put in like Denison here in a chronometer, over 80% of the calories are from protein, not fat. So it shows that people don't even know what fat is. But I'm not surprised. Most people like to use the word fat or protein when they really mean dead animal meat.
Fat is one of our oldest and most basic nutrients.
Well, that statement makes absolutely no sense. No macronutrient is any older or more basic than the other. Carbs, protein, fat, all the same when it comes to that stuff, guys.
Because in the early 20th century, doctors began to notice a disturbing rise in a once rare condition called heart disease. Americans were determined to fight heart disease, but instead they were bamboozled by the sugar industry.
Oh man, that's a good one. I mean, it's pretty much hypocritical to complain about the lobbying efforts of the sinister sugar industry when the meat and dairy industry spends over $130 million a year lobbying. That's way more than the sugar industry. And what are they lobbying for? High-fat foods.
This is Ancel Keys. Keys was certain that fat was the cause of heart disease, but only because he cherry-picked his data to get the result he wanted.
Right, what's under attack here is the research of Ancel Keys. And this attack here is just completely wrong, and it's right out of any like third-rate low-carb blog. Anyway, Ancel Keys discovered back in the 50s that the more fat you had as a percent of total calories, the higher your risk of heart disease. And the reverse is true. The lower fat you had, the less fat you had, the less risk of heart disease. Well, some critics said he was cherry picking because he only included 7 studies in this study for this graph here. Well, fellow researcher critics of Ancel Keys claimed he was cherry picking since he only used data from 7 countries. Well, these two famous researchers, the critics, did their own study where they used data from 22 countries. And from their results, low carbers say, well, there is no more correlation between eating high fat and high incidence of heart disease. Well, if you look at their data here, well, it's not as strong as Ancel Keys' graph, but there still is a clear upward trend. And a dirty little secret that no low carber will ever tell you is that this very study by Ancel's critics found that there is even a stronger correlation between protein, animal protein intake, and heart disease, which makes a lot of sense because, as I showed earlier with that venison example, fat and protein go together. They travel together in the same food. You just don't eat one or the other. And several decades later in the 70s, a 29-country study further supported the idea that animal protein is highly correlated with heart disease. And in 1999, yet another study found that high-fat foods like butter, lard, and meat were strongly correlated with heart disease, while low-fat plant foods like vegetables and legumes were not.
People just believe this jerk?
Yeah, because of a big assist from a group with a sickly sweet agenda, the sugar industry. And Big Sweet's relentless lobbying didn't stop there. They spent years packing health panels with sugar-friendly scientists.
Oh, that's funny. No, it's the much more powerful meat and dairy industries that exert a much more powerful influence over our nation's food policies. Let's see some of the pressure that, say, the meat industry has put on our government.
National Cattlemen's Beef Association felt that beef's important role in the diet was underappreciated.
The sad truth is, if government bodies like the USDA actually listened to science rather than the influence of high-fat, high-protein promoting meat and dairy industries, things would be a lot different.
Commentators on the USDA Dietary Guidelines Committee recommendations note that there is no discussion at all of the scientific research on the health consequences of eating meat. If the committee actually discussed this research, it would be unable to justify its recommendation to eat meat, as the research would show that meat increases the risks of chronic diseases. We know that a plant-based diet of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and no meat reversed heart disease.
Their campaign reached its sugar height when the USDA officially recommended a low-fat diet in 1980.
Nope, once again, that's a low-carb myth. The USDA has never recommended a low-fat diet. That just would not get through all the industry influence of the meat and dairy industry. Let's look at their actual wording here from 1980. They said to avoid too much fat, whatever the heck that means. They also in the same breath mentioned avoid too much sugar.
Once everyone switched to low-fat foods, everyone started getting thinner, right?
Quite the opposite. After the USDA came out against fat, obesity rates actually skyrocketed.
Again, this is another low-carb piece of junk myth that they always misrepresent here. Again, look at the graph. Between 1960 and 1980, people were gaining weight before these so-called low-fat guidelines came into place. Well, let's look at what happened after 1980. Well, it's true. People's overall relative amount of fat did decrease a little bit after the 1980 guidelines. But if you look at their overall amount of fat, their absolute amount of fat went up 11%. People still ate more fat. So how did the relative fat percent drop? Well, it's because people were eating more calories in general, more fat, more protein, more carbs. So people never ate less fat after the 80s. They continued to eat more fat.
The sugar industry peddled bad science and demonized fat in order to sell us more of the product that actually causes heart disease and weight gain. We now know that sugar is linked to both heart disease and weight gain.
Really? So you're saying that a high-fat diet rich in meat protects against heart disease and weight gain? Well, there's no science to back that up. Only a plant-based diet has been shown to protect against and potentially reverse heart disease. Compare these two photos here, the before and after. On the left, notice how the vein is much more restricted, much less blood flow than the one on the right, several years later. How did that happen? What actually reversed heart disease? Was it eating a bunch of high-fat meat? No, that wouldn't do it. Only one diet can do that. It's a plant-based, low-fat diet. Yes, low-fat does not cause heart disease. It actually reverses heart disease. Let's see your high-fat diet do that, bro. Furthermore, there have been experiments comparing those who have coronary heart disease. They put them on high-fat, high-protein Atkins diets and low-fat vegetarian diets.
Those sticking to the vegetarian diet showed a reversal of their heart disease as expected. Their partially clogged arteries literally got cleaned out. They had 20% less atherosclerotic plaque in their arteries at the end of the year than at the beginning. What happened to those who abandoned the treatment diet and switched over to the low-carb diet? Their condition significantly worsened. 40 to 50% more artery clogging at the end of the year.
So basically, all the facts that College Humor presented here were not facts at all. They're just scientifically untrue. It's actually the opposite. Low-fat, plant-based diets don't cause cancer. They don't make people obese. They got so much wrong here that I have a sneaking suspicion that this video was a sponsored video from some kind of meat or dairy lobbying arm. When I've had videos before which I've shown there is a large budget put out by the meat and dairy industry to influence vloggers and bloggers and the like. So College Humor should have been more transparent if this was the case, because I don't see how they could have got everything wrong. I mean, they got everything wrong. The only way they could do that is if they were handed some talking points, a script by a group that wants to get that misinformation out there. And I want to make one thing abundantly clear here. I'm not advocating that people go out to their supermarkets and buy all the foods that are labeled on the box low fat, because that's processed food. Yeah, it's low in fat, but I'm talking about food that's naturally low in fat, generally speaking, plant-based foods, except for things like nuts and oils and avocados and durian. Plant foods are generally pretty low in fat. That's what I'm advocating here, a whole food plant-based diet. All right, so I want to get that out of the way. So comment down below. I know a lot of you guys asked me to do this video, so what were you thinking? Why did you want me to comment on the College Humor video? What were your thoughts? Were you pissed off when you watched it too, seeing all this misinformation being spread to hundreds of thousands of people? Yeah, that's horrific in its own right there. And hit like if you like me doing these expose videos, getting the facts set straight. So until next time, guys, talking to you, College Humor, stop spreading misinformation and instead keep it carb. Get off that high-fat crap.